UFC is one of the most watched fighting sports available. Millions of people tune in to see their favorite fighters battle head-to-head in a high-rush battle. One of the biggest upcoming names in UFC is Raul Rosas Jr. Now the fighter has spoken about his so far incredible career in the sport. Want to know why you should remember the name and what he has to say? Keep watching to find out. First, let's talk a little about Raul Rosas Jr. Raul Rosas Jr. made history with his first fight. Simply fighting was enough for him to make history, as he became the youngest fighter to step into the ring. Born in October of 2004, Rosas is just shy of being 18 years old. Born on the 8th of October in Mexico, Rosas has earned himself the nickname of El Niño Problema, which roughly translates to the problem child, a name that Rosas has come to earn. Rosas' first fight was against Eduardo Velasquez back in November of 2021, a fight he would end up winning. Since then, Rosas has gone against 5 other fighters, winning each match. The 17-year-old fighter has gone against men who are up to 28 years old. Despite fighting men that are 5 to 10 years older than him in age, Rosas has yet to fight a match that he didn't win. Coming at 5 feet and 9 inches and 135 pounds, Rosas is currently placed in the bantamweight class, which is the second to lowest weight class a UFC fighter can fight in. Out of 220 active Mexican fighters, Rosas is placed at 22nd on the list. Next, let's talk quickly about the history of the UFC. It's only fair to take a second to discuss the sport that Rosas is quickly making a name for himself in. UFC has been around for just 1 year shy of 3 decades, seeing it start in the year 1993 as a professional mixed martial arts organization created by martial artist Ryan Gracie and businessman Art Davie. Things really changed for UFC and the sport of MMA in early 2011. UFV had found itself under new ownership with Zuffa LLC. UFC became a more organized and controlled sport. While UFC had its fair share of fans in the beginning, it's nothing compared to the number of people who tune in and pay for the many pay-per-view matches that are held by UFC. To date, UFC is responsible for over 40 live martial arts events in the span of just 1 year. As well as getting great amounts of money from the people watching at home, UFC also sells out some of the greatest arenas in the world. It's no surprise that the current president of UFC is worth a whopping $500 million as of 2019, which is $598 million more than he paid for it in 2001. Now let's take a look at what Raul Rosas Jr. has to say about his fighting career. Many UFC-related websites and social media pages on the internet have had something to say about Rosas' career, but most people are interested in hearing what he himself has to say. In a recent interview, Rosas sat down and discussed how he saw things. Rosas gave a bit of background into his career, saying that he started his first fight at just 15 years old. After a promoter led him on to his card, Rosas fought 2 amateur fights, the one at 15 and then another at 16, not going professional until he turned 17. In order to be able to fight, Rosas had to sign paperwork for the commission, as well as have Jason House record a video detailing the reasons he thought Rosas was ready to fight at the level he was trying for. The commission approved, and the rest is history. Rosas also made it clear that he strays from the other 17-year-olds around him, saying that while they were at parties or on summer vacation, he could be found in the gym training to get where he is now. Rosas said this has been routine since he was even younger than 17 years old. Moving on, let's talk about Chris Barnett's injury. During Chris Barnett's fight against Jake Collier, commentators noticed that there was something different about how his face appeared. The commentators expressed their concern about what they thought to be the signs of very serious injuries. It would turn out that they were not all wrong in their assessment. Thankfully, it wasn't as serious as they thought it was at first, but it still did a heap of damage. Speaking on the injury, Barnett said that Collier had hit him across the cheek. Collier's punch had been met with so much force that Barnett said that inside of his mouth, a chunk of his cheek was left dangling. Barnett compared trying to bite the chunk to trying to cut through a steak with a butter knife, attributing that to his mouthpiece. Thankfully, the injury was not one that lasted long, nor one that would prove dangerous to his fighting career. This is not the first tough situation that Barnett would have to go through. This injury comes after Barnett survived a car crash, was convinced by his doctor to not make his weight class, causing him to not be able to fight, and the unfortunate passing of his wife. Nevertheless, Barnett has shown that he is one fighter who doesn't give up. Getting back to Raul Rosas Jr., let's look at what Bo Nickel had to say about the fighter. Bo Nickel is another rising star in the world of UFC. Out of Nickel's complete 6 matches, he has won 2 of them. Only one of them was a loss, with the rest being drawn. This This makes for a 4-week streak for Nickel, the 26-year-old fighter who is right behind Rosas on most people's radars. Rosas and Nickel were the two main fighters people thought would acquire a fighting contract. People were half right in their assumption. While Bull Nickel did not end up with a contract, Rosas would of course come out with his contract. This is a fact that Nichols does not mind. Many people had assumed that Nichols would be upset and perhaps have a chip on his shoulder about losing out on a contract. Nichols himself put those speculations to rest, saying to Rosas, "I don't really care, do your thing." Nichols went as far as to congratulate Rosas on his accomplishment of being the youngest fighter on the roster. Nichols said it was said that he held no resentment towards Rosas, as he wasn't one to hate at all. Nichols did admit that though he was not angry at Rosas, he did not sit down to watch him fight. Since we're talking UFC, let's talk about Rafael Dos Anjos' return fight against Bryan Barberena. While Rafael Dos Anjos was once known as a lightweight champion, he will not be for much longer, as he is making a triumphant return back to the 170 pounds required welterweight class he was originally known for. Returning to welterweight is not the only big announcement coming from Anjos. Anjos' first welterweight fight is set to be against Bryan Barberena. The fight is set to be held at the UFC Orland on the 3rd of December. The last time we saw Anjos fight was against Rafael Fiziev, all the way back in July. The fight ended in the 5th round with Anjos being knocked out. Anjos will get a chance to redeem himself against Barberena, who currently has a record of 18-8. The match between Anjos and Barberena will not be the only fight taking place on the 3rd of December. The fight will take place in UFC Orlando and will be one of 11 fights. The match will be the last of the night and will be followed by Darren Elkins and Jonathan Pierce in the featherweight division. The first match of the event will be between Tracy Cortez and Amanda Ribas for the flyweight division. Finally, let's talk about all of the other news regarding the UFC. UFC has been around for almost 30 years, yet it still finds a way to remain relevant. Recently, in the world of UFC, Aspen Ladd, who has been performing since 2015, has been released from the UFC roster of fighters after she missed her weight. Despite Ladd having a 7-fight run, Ladd could not make the appropriate weight for the scheduled fight against Sarah McMahon at the UFC Vegas 60. This resulted in her dropping ties with UFC altogether. Ladd was supposed to be in the bantamweight class, which requires no more than 135 pounds. Ladd came in just over the requirement at 138 pounds. In other related news, UFC had hosted its 50-50 raffle, which is a part of UFC 279. This is the 5th raffle and garnered $6,170. The money that UFC has raised will go to the UFC Foundation, which is a foundation that was created in an attempt to take the UFC earnings and, as they put it, make a positive and sustainable impact by advocating for youth. Since the foundation was created, UFC has garnered over $1.14 million since it was founded in 2021. UFC has been a very prominent sport, and with that comes many prominent fighters, like that of Raul Rosas Jr. The fighter has made a name for himself and is continually making an even bigger name for himself. Who do you think can compete with Rosas? Let us know.